Hi everyone, welcome to Asexual Reproduction lesson. We are still in the beginning of cycle 3, which is changes. And so far we have discussed changes in terms of mitosis and how the cell changes so that it can grow and divide. So just a quick cell division recap. Cells go through a period of growth, which remember is interphase. Interphase is not actually one of the phases or stages of mitosis, rather it's what happens to the cell before it can grow and divide, or before it can divide, it has to grow big enough so that it can divide. And then once it is big enough, it can divide and goes through prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, cytokinesis. And at the very end, the outcome is that mitosis produces two identical daughter cells. There is nothing to write down for this slide. I did just want to go over that with you before we get into asexual reproduction. So a little overview of multicellular versus single-celled organisms. Multicellular organisms, the cells divide so they can grow, repair, and develop. Examples are skin cells. They divide to repair a cut. Whenever you get a cut on your skin, the reason that your skin heals is because your cells are dividing to repair it. They're multiplying. Single-celled organisms, so remember those were things like amoeba, paramecium, euglena, volvox. These cells divide in order to reproduce because the single cells are the actual organisms. So again, multicellular organisms, an example is humans. We are multicellular organisms. We are made up of lots of different types of cells, whereas single-celled organisms are only made of one type of cell. And those actual cells are the organisms themselves. Okay, so asexual reproduction. The term asexual means an organism does not need to actually have sex in order to reproduce. That's why there's the letter A before the word sexual. It means not sexual. All unicellular organisms and a few multicellular reproduce through asexual reproduction. Whiptail lizards, starfish, flatworms, there's tons of them. Asexual reproduction. So eukaryotes, remember, have a nucleus. Eukaryotes can be single and multicellular organisms and reproduce through or divide through mitosis. Prokaryotes do not have a nucleus, and some examples of prokaryotes are single-celled. So notice that we have single-celled that do have a nucleus and single-celled that don't have a nucleus. So there's three types of asexual reproduction. There's binary fission, budding, and regeneration. And we're going to go back to eukaryotes and prokaryotes when I talk about each of the three. So I just wanted to give you a little overcap before we get into each of the three types of asexual reproduction. All right, binary fission. So binary fission takes place in bacteria. And there is a link that you cannot click in the video, but the link is on cycle 3. Right with the video for this animation. And if you notice, if you start at the top, binary fission starts with one bacteria cell. So that's the one with the green spaghetti string looking thing in the middle. That is the DNA. The DNA is not in a nucleus. So this is an example of a prokaryote. Bacteria is a prokaryote because it does not have a nucleus. It is single-celled. So it does not go through mitosis. So you have the bacteria, you have the DNA in the middle, and what happens is the cell, just like at the end phase of mitosis with cytokinesis, the cell starts to pinch together in the middle, and then it breaks into two. The two bacteria that it breaks into are identical to one another. And then those two will break into two more, and those two will break into two more. And you'll see how rapidly bacteria reproduce. And they reproduce with what's called exponential growth. So if you were to graph their reproduction, it would make a J curve, a J-shaped curve on a graph, which means each minute they're reproducing super, super quickly. And you're going to do a little simulation in class with some beans to help you visualize that. So binary fission is a form of asexual reproduction that occurs in prokaryotes. We just went over that, and there's no nucleus. The DNA is just hanging out in the cytoplasm. So the DNA copies itself, and then both copies stay attached to the cell membrane. As the cell grows, the two strands of DNA are separated and move to opposite ends of the cell. Then the cell squeezes in the middle and divides it into two. That's very similar to cytokinesis. Most common example that you guys would be able to relate to is strep throat. So this is how strep throat divides and takes over in your body. And the reason that you take antibiotics is to kill the bacteria and to stop them from dividing so fast like this. Okay, budding. Again, there's an animation for budding that I want you to watch. It's on the website under cycle 3. Unicellular and multicellular organisms can reproduce through budding. So what happens is food accumulates and causes a bud to form. When so much food has accumulated, the bud gets heavy and it grows and it detaches. It gets so heavy that it breaks off and becomes its own organism and is identical to its parent bud. The animation will give you a really good visual of that, but it's basically, if we were just to keep adding cells until it got so heavy that that clump of cells broke off. That's exactly what budding is, and that clump of cells that breaks off is exactly the same as the thing it broke off of, and they are called parent and daughter. All right, regeneration is the third kind of asexual reproduction, and there's a really cool leopard gecko animation, and so that I also want you to watch. And you can watch these animations as much as you need. They're really quick, and I'd like you to watch them over and over until you really understand what binary fission is, what budding is, and what regeneration is. So in certain multicellular organisms, there are specialized cells at the site of a wound or a lost limb, and these are able to regrow into different types of tissues, and this is what's called regeneration. Examples that are in the classroom are the plant cuttings that are on the low lesson table that are sitting in a glass of water. So I broke those off of a big plant and set them in water, and they are regenerating themselves. Leopard gecko tail is another really good one. Starfish. There's lots of different animals that reproduce through regeneration. So watch the animation, and it's really quite fascinating. All right, here's just an overview of asexual reproduction. So we have mitosis, which takes place in eukaryotes. So the organisms that undergo mitosis do have a nucleus and are multicellular. And if you look at the other three, binary fission, budding, and regeneration, they are all three prokaryotes. So mitosis, you have to have a nucleus in order to undergo mitosis. Mitosis is a form of asexual reproduction. However, it's different from binary fission, budding, and regeneration because those three are all taking place in prokaryotes, which means they don't have a nucleus. Binary fission is in single-celled organisms, as is budding. However, regeneration can take place in multicellular organisms as well. So I wanted to just give you this overview. The main takeaway is not to memorize single-celled, multi-celled, but really to understand that in order to reproduce through mitosis, you have to have a nucleus because the DNA winds itself into chromosomes and then comes out of the nucleus. The chromosomes line themselves up in different ways in order to split into two cells, two identical daughter cells that are identical to the parent cell that it started with. Whereas in the other three, it's all taking place in prokaryotes where the DNA is just hanging out in the cytoplasm. It is not wound up in the nucleus. That is the main difference in these. And that is what your takeaway should be. Awesome. I hope you enjoyed this video lesson, and you will have a card layout as practice. You will also have some stations as practice, and then I will review this with you when I get back. I hope you guys have an awesome day, and please email me if you have any questions. Okay, bye.